I go by Dark V.L, and this is one of my grim truth tales. Let's jump right in. The worst thing my father ever did was tell a stranger my name. 3 days later, something started rewriting my brain. No grand villain origin, no ancient curse, no blood pact signed under a full moon, just a 53-year-old man in a rumpled blazer, sitting across from someone he'd never met, saying words he absolutely knew were not true. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My father's name is Lach, and for most of my childhood, he was the kind of optimist that makes pessimists look prophetic. He ran a mid-sized logistics company out of Akron, Ohio, the sort of business that exists in the background of the economy, invisible and necessary, like plumbing. He had 12 employees, a leased warehouse, and a business model that had worked reliably for 22 years. And then, like a lot of things that work reliably for 22 years, it stopped working. I was 16 when the company started bleeding. I didn't know the specifics then. What I did know was that Dad stopped humming in the mornings, stopped watching the game on Sundays, and started taking calls in the garage with the door shut. My mother had died when I was 9, so it was just the two of us, and I'd gotten pretty good at reading him. The garage door closing was not a good sign. The company needed capital, fast. The banks said no, twice, then a very polite third time that was somehow worse than the first two. Dad had already refinanced the house. He'd already borrowed from Uncle Breckton, who was not a man you wanted to owe money to, and who made that abundantly clear at every family gathering thereafter, which is how he ended up on a private lending consultation in a hotel conference room in downtown Cleveland, sitting across from a man named Mr. Hollis. I know what happened in that room because Dad told me later, much later. By then, telling me was the only thing he had left to offer. He said Mr. Hollis didn't look like anything. Not ugly, not handsome, not young, or not old either. He was the human equivalent of a stock photo, the kind of face that doesn't leave a residue in your memory. Average height, light gray suit. He set a single folder on the table and folded his hands on top of it and asked my father to describe his business situation. Dad described it honestly, at first, and then Mr. Hollis asked about assets, collateral. What did my father have that was worth something? My father thought about the house, about the warehouse. He thought about the 12 employees he was 3 weeks from having to let go. And then, for a reason he has never been fully able to explain to me, he thought about me. My daughter, he said, is something of a prodigy. Software development. She's already built 2 algorithmic trading models that outperformed the market index. She's 16. By the time she's 18, she'll be worth more than anything I own. Mr. Hollis looked at him for a long, long time. What is her name? He asked. Verity, my father said. Verity Lach. Mr. Hollis opened the folder. Here's what you need to know about me at 16. I could barely pass my computer science elective. I'd built exactly one app, a habit tracker that I'd used for 11 days before abandoning it. I had a C+ average, a best friend named Dory who was obsessed with true crime podcasts and exactly 0 algorithmic trading models to my name. My father knew all of this, of course. He signed the contract anyway. And whatever he signed something back. 3 days after the meeting, I woke up at 2 a.m. with a headache I can only describe as the feeling of a file being transferred into a hard drive that wasn't designed to hold it. It didn't feel like learning, it felt like something being installed, sector by sector, while I slept, or while I tried to. I lay there in the dark and thought about code. Not like I'd thought about it before, which was vaguely and with mild dread. I thought about it the way you suddenly understand a joke after the fact, and the full body click of recognition. Except it wasn't a joke. It was a recursive function, and I could see it in the way you can see a physical object, rotating it in my mind, examining it from every angle. I got up and opened up my laptop. By sunrise, I had written something I didn't have a name for yet. By noon, I understood what it was. By the following Monday, I had rebuilt my father's logistics routing software from scratch, cutting operational costs by 31%. I thought I was having some kind of a breakdown, honestly. I called Dory, said, "I think I'm going insane." And she said, "Cool, what kind?" Which is why she's my best friend. But I wasn't going insane. I was being used, and I didn't know by who or for what. The money came through and kept coming. The company stabilized, then grew. Dad hired 6 more people. He bought a warehouse outright. He stopped closing the garage door. I didn't tell him about the headaches, about the way I'd sometimes lose 4 or 5 hours to a problem that had nothing to do with school or homework, that I'd surface from it blinking and disoriented, like coming up from deep water. About the fact that the code I was writing felt less like something I was creating and more like something I was receiving. I told myself a lot of things that year, that I'd just discovered a talent late, that the stress of watching Dad struggle had unlocked something dormant, and that there was a perfectly rational explanation. You know how there's always someone who insists they'll figure out the trick behind the magic show? I was that person, right up until the moment Mr. Hollis knocked on our front door. I was 17 years, 2 months, and 11 days old. He looked exactly as my father had described him. The forgettable face, the gray suit, the hands folded with that particular stillness that, now that I was seeing it in person, reminded me of something switched to standby mode rather than actually being at rest. I realized I couldn't tell what color his eyes were, even while I was looking directly at them. He had a copy of the contract, and somehow it looked newer than the one my father had signed. He explained everything very calmly, the way you'd explain a billing cycle. When Verity turns 18, she comes to work for me exclusively, indefinitely. The contract is clear. You can't do this, my father said. She's a person, not an asset. You described her as an asset, Mr. Hollis said. Specifically, you described her as worth more than anything you own. There's a particular kind of silence that happens when someone quotes your worst moment back at you with perfect accuracy. My father stood in it for a long time. He couldn't look at the contract. He turned his face away from it entirely, the way you'd turn away from something bright. "There is one alternative," Mr. Hollis said. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, blank except for a number. "If Verity can tell me my real name before her 18th birthday, the contract is void. I will consider the matter settled." He set the card on the entryway table and left. We stood there for a while. "Dad," I finally said. "I know," he said. "You told him I was a coding prodigy." "I know." "Dad, I had a C+ in computer science." He sat down on the floor right there in the entryway, which was not something I'd ever seen him do. "I know, Verity. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at the blank business card. I had 9 months and 19 days. I want to tell you that I'm some kind of a genius investigator, that I cracked the whole thing in a montage of determined typing and dramatic revelations. Dory kept saying our situation reminded her of episodes of her favorite podcasts and offered to help investigate, which mostly involved her making a very elaborate corkboard with red string, bless her heart. But here's the thing about trying to find the real name of someone who has apparently never legally existed. The phone number on the card was a burner, obviously. The lending firm he'd represented was an LLC, registered in Delaware, which is the corporate equivalent of a shrug. The registered agent was another company. That company's registered agent was a third company, and by the time we'd traced back through 7 layers of incorporation, Dory and I were staring at a shell entity registered in 2003 to an address that turned out to be a UPS store in Tempe, Arizona. I tried facial recognition, feeding descriptions into every database I could access, and the ones I wasn't supposed to access, because the abilities Mr. Hollis had installed in me turned out to include a fairly comprehensive disregard for cybersecurity firewalls. Nothing. The face that didn't leave a residue also didn't leave a digital footprint. I tried the contract, signed on his end with 2 initials and a flourish that resolved into nothing. I tried the hotel in Cleveland, the conference room rental records, the parking garage logs. It wasn't just that he didn't exist. It was like the world had been edited to remove him. Every trail ended at a wall so clean it had to be deliberate, like someone had gone through and buffered away every surface. Months passed. I kept working because the pull didn't stop. I'd find myself solving problems I hadn't been asked to solve, optimizing systems I had no business being inside of, predicting financial shifts with an accuracy that made my father's accountant go very quiet during their monthly calls. I hated it. I hated that I was good at it. I hated that some installed, foreign part of me found it genuinely satisfying. My 18th birthday was 6 weeks out when I found the forum post. I wasn't even looking for it. I was 3 layers deep in a rabbit hole about historical financial fraud, chasing a hunch because my hunches had gotten very reliable. The hunch was that Mr. Hollis had done this before. The post was 11 years old, buried in an archived forum that no longer existed on the surface web. Someone with the username Orosboros84 had written, in plain English, that they'd encountered a private lender who'd made a contract with their family that seemed impossible to break. And they were looking for the man's name, any information at all, anything. 47 replies, most of them useless, but one reply from an account that had never posted before or since said only, "The name he uses is the name no one thinks to say out loud." And the second I read it, I knew I'd already said it. I thought about my father, sitting across a table from a forgettable man, trying to save his company. I thought about what he'd offered. Not the business, not the house, not anything he owned. He'd offered a name. My daughter, her name is Verity Lach. Mr. Hollis had asked for it specifically, first thing, before the folder and before the contract, before anything else. What is her name? And then I looked at the contract again. The two initials I'd assumed were his signature, they weren't a signature. They were a notation, a label for what had been transferred. V.L. I called Dory and said, "I think I have it." And she knocked over her entire corkboard in excitement, and I heard string and pushpins scatter across her floor. The name no one thinks to say out loud. Not his name, the name he takes. The name embedded in the contract, not as a signature, but as the collateral itself. When my father spoke my name in that conference room, he hadn't just been describing me. In whatever logic governed Mr. Hollis and what he did, he had been making a transfer, a name given freely, accepted by a witness, the name that made the contract valid. My name, Verity Lach. That was what I had to say out loud to his face before my birthday, not to identify him, to reclaim what had been handed over. He came to the door exactly 3 days before I turned 18. I think he considered it as a courtesy. I answered before he knocked. He looked at me, and for the first time, something in that forgettable face arranged itself into what might have been curiosity. "Verity?" he said. "Verity Lach," I said. "That's the name on the contract. That's the name my father gave you, and I'm taking it back." The air in the hallway tightened, like a connection dropping before a signal dies. "That," he said quietly, "is not how this usually goes." Something shifted in him then, not anger, closer to the expression of someone who has just seen a chess move they hadn't anticipated and finds, despite everything, that they almost respect it. "Careful," he said. "Names don't always go back where they came from." He picked up the business card from the entryway table, looked at it for a moment, set it back down. "The contract," he said, "is void." And he left. My father appeared in the hallway behind me. He looked at the empty doorstep, then at me. "Is it over?" "Yeah," I said. I think so." Here's what I haven't told anyone except Dory, and now, I suppose, you. The abilities didn't go away. I kept waiting for the headaches to stop, for the code to go quiet, for whatever had been installed to power down. It didn't. It's still there, whatever it is. The recursive functions, the pattern recognition, the way I can look at a market and see the shape of what it's about to do. It's mine now, I think, or I'm its. The distinction feels less clear than it probably should. I'm 19. I've turned down 4 acquisition offers and 2 venture funds. I work on what I choose to work on for exactly as long as I choose to work on it. Mr. Hollis has not come back. But sometimes late at night, when I'm 3 layers deep in a problem no one asks me to solve, I think about that forum post about Orosboros84, who'd been looking for a name 11 years ago. I never found out if they got their answer. And I think about the contract and the 2 initials, and I wonder how many names he's collected, how many names he's still holding, how many people's daughters and sons are out there right now, half owned by something that knows exactly how to stay invisible. The number on the business card is still in my phone. Some nights, I almost call it. Because if I do, and if he answers, that means he never needed my name in the first place. If you've ever encountered a lender with no identity or someone who suddenly became more than they should be, tell me in the comments, because I don't think she was the first. Thanks for listening. Make sure you like and comment so I know what you enjoyed about this new and enhanced grim horror story. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can buy me a coffee with the link below in the comments. Until my next dark tale, have a frightfully fun day.